Hi everyone, my name is Kaely and welcome to our PD Development Byte. This video centers around the ICT tools Kialo EDU, Quizziz and their applications in both Year 10 Science, Maths and History. This video will be divided into 4 parts. I'll first begin by introducing Kialo in terms of their SETT framework and specifically how it can be used in a Year 10 Science classroom. Next, I'll hand off to Tiana, who will talk about using teaching judgment and troubleshooting using Kialo, as well as its application in a Year 10 mathematics classroom. Followed by Ashleigh, who will talk about instant feedback and student response systems using Quizziz. Finally, we'll hear from Tom about UDL and differentiation using Kialo and Quizziz. Let's begin. So our approach to ICT implication uses the simple yet systematic SETT framework. That is student, environment, tasks, and tools. We valued an approach in which student data is gathered in an organized and simple manner to devise the most appropriate and effective devices. Zabala, in a 1995 paper, deduced that the SETT approach eliminates device abandonment by first removing obstacles associated with the students and their environment. The SETT framework only provides a skeleton framework that could easily be manipulated and adapted to incorporate teacher judgment, hence valuing an evidence-informed pedagogy rather than evidence-based. Alright, so beginning with our student, we think about their strengths and area of concern. In this case, we say our students have shown strengths in using their knowledge of scientific concepts to draw conclusions based off data. However, they are lacking in successfully communicating their scientific ideas for the purpose of constructing evidence-based arguments, which addresses the ACARA Year 10 Science Communicating Criteria. In turn, this will improve not only students' ICT capabilities, but their literacy, critical creative thinking, and ethical understanding. Secondly, we think about the environment. We are assuming an environment where each student has access to an individual computer, as does the teacher, whether this be by BYOD, bring your own device, or computers supplied by the school. This is a fair assumption as currently 70% of high schools use BYOD programs, and computer labs are present in 40% of high schools. A 2011 survey by ACARA revealed that 76% of grade 10 students had more than 5 years experience using computers. Therefore, at a grade 10 level, it can be assumed that students are confident navigating basic computer applications. Therefore, criteria for selecting IT tools are that it is user-friendly and simple to learn by students and teachers. Later, Tiana will touch more on troubleshooting in cases of environments without the same access to ICT. Next, we move to tasks. Students have been previously learning about how different types of chemical reactions are undergone to yield a range of products, specifically substances such as fuels, metals, and pharmaceuticals. Despite the students touching on the use of chemicals in industry, we wish to prompt students to look deeper into the use of chemicals and their importance. Leading up to this point, the teacher should be taking opportunities to probe bigger, thought-provoking questions that will get students thinking for themselves and forming their own opinion. For example, after learning about the periodic table, you as a teacher may ask, how could the periodic table be arranged differently? It is important that these probing questions are delivered as open questions that have an opportunity for a multitude of answers. To help with your formation of open-ended discussion questions, we encourage you to participate in the following quiz. From the following questions, select which of these are appropriate open-ended debate questions. So pause the video and discuss your answers amongst your peers and restart when you're confident with your answers. Okay, welcome back. If you selected questions A, C, and F as true, you're correct. So let's continue. This brings us to the final decisive factor in the SETT framework, technology. It is possible that these open-ended questions can be undergone as a physical class discussion or debate. However, with this activity without assistive technology could lead to class disruption, with students talking over one another or students being too nervous or embarrassed to contribute to discussion. So using Kialo EDU, students can be allocated to a team, and within this team be split into groups to discuss a debate question. This device allows teachers to look at the discussion topology to observe which students are and are not contributing, which eliminates students not contributing their opinions. Let's see how this technology device can be incorporated into your Year 10 science classroom. Following their scaffolded learning in industry, the students will be asked the following debate question. Should dangerous chemicals be banned or destroyed completely? Why or why not? This activity should take roughly 40 minutes. Prior to class, you will need to divide the class into 2 teams, for or against. Teams are predetermined to eliminate students from simply joining teams based off the opinions of others. The Kialo EDU discussion page can either be accessed through their invite sent to their email or through a discussion access link that can be displayed on the board. So it is kept very private and there is no opportunity for anyone to intercept this discussion page. The students are set the expectation that they must each contribute at least 2 claims, and their claims must be supported by chemistry-based examples and scientific research. To give students a leg up, in the background info of the Kialo discussion page, there will be some relevant links to websites for each side of the argument. It is the responsibility of the teacher to source these appropriate websites that will help the students. So we're about to take a moment to pause this video. So use this time to research a potentially relevant website that could be given to students to help answering the debate question. It's just that one there. So should dangerous chemicals be banned or destroyed completely? Why or why not? And you can add these website links to the following Padlet. This Padlet can be returned to as a potential website bank for teachers who wish to undergo this activity, so be sure to save this link for later use. Okay, so welcome back. Hopefully you've been able to find some useful websites and resources to contribute to that Padlet. Anyway, continuing on, so after students have researched and written their individual claim, they are then given the instruction of commenting or collaborating on at least 5 of their other classmates' claims, suggesting improvement or other avenues of consideration. This acts as a method of reciprocal teaching, whereby students will work together to come to a common understanding. Teachers may also contribute their own comments and collaborations to guide the students in the right direction. At the end of this activity, there is an opportunity for you to archive or export discussion so the page can be returned to later. So this concludes part 1 of the PD. Next, I will hand you off to Tiana.
And in this next section of our Byte, we will explore some things to consider when designing a Year 10 mathematics lesson using ICT. Specifically, we will target the literacy and information and communication technology capability subsections of the ACEL Y1749 learning areas under the Australian curriculum. Together, we will also explore the importance of teacher judgment and how it's more than a way of deciphering the advantages of digital technology in our classrooms. Lastly, we will finish with a strategy that will help limit technology failure in the classroom. So, to understand teacher judgment, it is first important to understand learnification and its implications. Biesta encompasses learnification as the new language of literacy, critiqued from jargon used in theory, policy and practices. The most notable is Freire's banking education, wherein the students are merely objects obtaining information. Learnification can cause problems because it puts students in a box. They exist only to learn. Zhu et al. Warns against this, stating self-fulfilled prophecy has influence over our students' performance based on how we as the teacher view them and treat them. So, how can we try to prevent this? Biesta has proposed a model of 3 learning domains for educators to orient towards. They are qualification, socialization, and subjectification. Qualification involves the transmission of knowledge that allows students to do something. Socialization initiates students in culture and societal things, religion, politics, etc. And subjectification defines the way students exist as subjects of initiative rather than objects of others' actions. This is teacher judgment. What are we as educators judging to be the purpose of our educational arrangements and activities? What domains are we willing to temporarily give up in favour of different domains we think needs to be strengthened? So really quickly, we are going to pause for a moment and do a group activity. If everyone can get into groups of 3, I would like each of you to take on the role of a domain and have this as your stance. Now, you've already seen a bit of how Kialo works, and now I'd like you all to discuss how your chosen domain of purpose can be achieved through Kialo. In 5 minutes, I want you to resume the video. Pause now. So, now that we're all back, how can we use teacher judgment to structure a lesson that targets a learning area using Kialo? Have you already figured it out in your discussion? As you know, Kialo is a forum for debating and sharing ideas. This may seem tricky to incorporate into a mathematics lesson, but there are some ideas on how you can target your 3 domains with Kialo. So for qualification, we want to see if our students can solve questions by following a process or a set of steps. By setting up multiple questions, we can actually see how they perform. For socialisation, using Kialo, the students have an opportunity to discuss their results to one another and work towards a common answer. This builds community and social skills such as problem solving and working together. And for subjectification, hopefully by the end of the lesson, the students will have more confidence in their ability. As mentioned earlier, self-fulfilled prophecy influences a student's ability, and Kialo helps to break down the negative thinking that the students might have of themselves. Right, let's review. Please scan the QR code and do the crossword before continuing. Give yourself a few minutes to complete it. So, now that you're back from finishing the crossword, I hope all of you got the right answers. I just want to quickly recap what we've spoken about. So we've spoken about learnification, teacher judgment, and BS's 3 domains. But now I want to ask you a question. Why is this actually important? Education is polymorphous. We as educators need to judge whether our tool, such as Kialo, are educationally appropriate to the goals we have for the lesson. We can do this via a critical approach, meaning we as educators must reflect on what our students might learn or pick up from the ways in which we do things and the ways in which we organise and arrange education. This is critical thinking. Asking several questions around your technology choices and thinking about their effects on your students. It's also important to note that when choosing an ICT tool to use in the classroom, you should always consider the variety of stakeholders who might have their own agenda when creating such a tool. These hidden agendas may influence the way we perceive or use a tool. So we should always test them first and ask ourselves the question, is this actually useful? So really quickly, I want to mention that while we can create these really rich lessons using ICT, what happens if the technology decides to fail on us unexpectedly? Anticipating and troubleshooting is a great strategy we can implement before each lesson to limit the effects of technology failure. To break it down, anticipation is looking at the technology you're going to use and thinking of all the ways it could fail. For example, the internet may stop working one lesson. Troubleshooting is then thinking of solutions to those problems to act as your backup. Maybe you had printed paper versions set up before the lesson just in case of internet failure. So, to finish up, we will be doing one last activity. So, if I could get everyone into 6 teams, and I want you all to number yourselves as such, you have 3 minutes to anticipate all the ways Kialo may not work in your classroom, and then find ways to troubleshoot them. Write down all your ideas, and whichever duck finishes the race first, I will get that group to stand up and share their findings with everyone else. Right? Time starts now. So, how did you go? Here is a list of things that I thought of regarding Kialo. So, if you'd like, compare your list to my list and see if you can add anything to yours, see if you can add anything to mine. But just to finish up, I'm going to leave you with these parting thoughts. Do you think anticipating and troubleshooting is part of teacher judgment? Is this critical thinking? Is it both or neither? If you'd like, pause the video again and discuss. But now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague who will finish the next part of the Byte session. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.
Considering Kialo's use to develop critical thinking and inquiry skills, I've selected an ICT tool focused more on content instruction, student engagement, and participation. My name's Ashleigh, and I'll be talking about Quizziz. Quizziz falls into a category of ICT tools formerly known as Audience Response or Instant Feedback Systems, Clickers, or Student Response Systems, or SRS. Quizziz allows teachers to create presentations similar to PowerPoint presentations. As a slide is projected on screen, students use their laptops or mobile devices to answer questions in real time. Teachers can collect text responses, quick polls, multiple choice answers, and for longer responses, drawn responses, videos, and images. These are displayed instantly on the screen behind them. Evidence generally is in favour of clickers. Students have observed that they can be fun to use, that they can help them pay attention in class, and they've also been shown to correlate with higher scores in instructional content-based assessment items. In its simplest form, and a way a lot of teachers like to use Quizziz, is similarly to the way you'd use a tool like Kahoot, as a sort of gamified content-based quiz, and this is a great way to use Quizziz. It's very similar to what it was originally designed to do. However, now that it's been around for a few years, Quizziz has developed into a tool with the potential for a wide variety of applications. My approach focuses on using Quizziz as an SRS system to bolster student engagement and participation, while strategically embedding question-based learning at intervals throughout the lesson. I've used examples from a lesson I designed from a Year 10 history class on the stolen generations. At the Year 10 level, ACARA expects students to progress to a level where they, number one, are able to retain knowledge about key events, individuals, beliefs and values, and number two, interpret this knowledge to engage in deeper level critical and analytical thinking. There's also a human aspect to this unit and to the general capabilities required across the board, which lends itself naturally to collaborative learning. In my lesson, I've started with a simple, direct question about a date, having explained the content and giving students the date terra nullius was overturned. Students are then asked to recall that date in a friendly competitive quiz. So this serves the purpose of bringing student attention back to a learning activity at a point where I've already been talking a lot and engagement is likely to await. This question uses repetition to help students recall a key fact. Another great strategy to use at this point in the lesson would be to promote peer-to-peer learning by having students submit text responses summarizing key points you've covered. Where an SRS system, though, really sets itself apart is the instant feedback you receive directly onto your screen. When you're using Quizziz in present mode, you can quite literally look at the screen behind you and assess instantly what your students are retaining and what they aren't. And you can do this in a quantitative way. That is, you can collect real data about what your students are hearing when you're addressing them. You can even store this to look at later. This is the way I sort of fell in love with the idea of an SRS system. In a classroom without SRS, you would strategically ask questions of your students. For example, you might ask for volunteers, you might cold call, you might even split into groups. In most cases though, you're only really able to call on a small cross-section of your classroom, and you're limited in the amount of time you can spend doing this. An SRS makes it a lot simpler because you can continuously collect formative information about student proficiency. You can be collecting this information instantaneously from the entire classroom, and you can have students see this information visually and learn reciprocally from their classmates. You can also adjust your own teaching practice based on real-time quantitative data from your students, which allows lessons to be more student-led, more adaptive, collaborative, and differentiated based on the needs of your class.
Learners value being in control of their learning. Quizziz allows them to do this because it gives them input into the direction of the lesson, and it places real value on their responses. Teachers value having a tool that presents and continuously collects data for them.
In the following examples, I've demonstrated how I'd use Quizziz to generate responses to higher order questions. This is an excellent opportunity to adapt an SRS system for tasks where students exercise critical and analytical skills, and to prepare them for summative assessment collaboratively. Students could be encouraged to discuss their responses and collate shared knowledge. You might ask them, what are the merits or drawbacks of this particular answer? What insights does this answer have to offer? I'll link again at the end access to the rest of the quizzes. This example is based around source work, while this question helps students develop inquiry questions, which coincidentally will be used on their assessment later in the term. Quizziz provides a platform for student feedback, question and answers, and for the beloved exit ticket strategy, where a student's response to a reflective task or question is their ticket out of the door at the end of the lesson.
So what about the large body of research into ICT tools like Quizziz? Well, similar observations have been made by researchers about gamification and student response systems, particularly as Dachiva and Dichev note in reference to gamification that these strategies may have outpaced researchers' understanding of their mechanisms and methods. Kay and Lesage note a similar issue with reference to the large body of research into student response systems relying on qualitative or anecdotal evidence from educators and students and de-emphasizing quantitative data about the efficacy of those tools. Dachiva and Dichev suggested in 2014 in reference to Gartner's hype cycle of new technology that we may have reached a trough of disillusionment. In simple terms, this means we may have moved past that era where these strategies are shiny and new, widely adopted, and expected to have a revolutionary effect in the classroom. Educators may now feel disillusioned about their use. What we need to do is emphasize that tools like Quizziz can be used in meaningful, critical, and analytical ways in the classroom. So I think the key takeaway with observations like this about empirical research emphasizes the role of teacher judgment even more. After spending a lot of time with this software, I found the best way to mitigate a lot of issues, particularly with pacing your lessons and managing appropriate use and disruptions to student learning, is to structure your questions effectively. Prioritize certain information and differentiate between learning styles with the way you're putting your quizzes together. Provide manuals for students to get them ready to use your SRS tool, and consider creating a class contract to establish behavioral expectations. You should also ensure that student progress is visual and accessible, and the students feel included in the way you've decided to use technology. No classroom is going to look the same in that regard. Quizziz also provides options to make answers anonymous and differentiate questions in a quiz based on independent learning goals. I'd love to know what you think about using Quizziz in this admittedly somewhat unconventional way. I've linked a Padlet here and left a few resources and questions there for discussion. Thanks.
Morning all, I'm Tom, and in the final section of our PD Byte, I'll be discussing ways in which we can use Kialo and Quiz to expand and improve learning opportunities in Year 10 history classrooms. Specifically, we will be focusing on discussing ways in which these two ICT tools allow for students to improve their own critical and creative thinking in our Year 10 history classes. Specifically, the ACD SEH 110 area of the Australian curriculum. Also, we'll be looking into 1.2 of the Australian Professional Standards of Teachers, which is the understanding how students learn. Firstly, we will look into Kialo and Quiz and how they support the universal design of learning in improving the learning outcomes of students. Then we'll be looking specifically at the effects of GERM, which is Global Education Reform Movement, and its effects on students' learning outcomes. Next, we'll look at how Kialo and Quiz can be used as an alternative to standardized testing to improve the students' critical thinking skills. Lastly, I'll discuss the question of cyber safety when utilizing these ICT tools. Debate holds enormous potential to build 21st century skills such as critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and conflict resolution in the kindergarten to 12 classroom. All these attributes are necessary to succeed as a history student. How can we make learning these skills more universal? By considering the studies on UDL, we as teachers can apply this to our pedagogy to improve learning outcomes for our students. For example, if we were having a group discussion on the role Australia played in the Pacific Theatre in World War I, some students may get confused and lose track of where the discussion is going, as there is no intrinsic motivation to keep track of the discussion, and because it's not going to be super easy to understand it all and keep track of it if you're just doing a classroom discussion where there's no writing down or anything like that. This is where UDL is applied through the context of our chosen tool of Kialo. Then there will be fewer confused students and more learners. By having a simple and concise layout, Kialo allows for students to keep track of where the discussion is going, and allows these students to see the pros and cons of each point made in the argument. The difficulty in teaching critical thinking skills is that teachers often struggle to teach it effectively due to the complexity of implementing it and contextualizing the chosen topic. Often teachers teach students critical thinking skills, where students are simply objects that take on information that the teacher divulges. But by introducing debate into the history classroom, students will be forced to think critically, and using Kialo to facilitate these debates, we will improve the students' learning outcomes through the application of the 7 principles that guide UDL. Students that will be able to have a more streamlined and easy to use way of conducting a classroom debate through Kialo, which will create less confusion and less physical effort for the students in the debate, significantly raising the likelihood of learners. Quickly, we'll take a moment to pause and individually come up with one more example of each of the 7 guiding principles of UDL, and how it could assist learning opportunities of the lesson through Kialo and Quiz specifically. Off you go now. Standardized testing bends students and teachers' focus on positive data outcomes. Some term this as the datification of education. With the datification of education, students' critical thinking skills is usually sacrificed with this style of education. This is because teachers let their pedagogy become test results focused. Therefore, they fall into the habit of giving students repetitive forms of assessment with little to no room for critical thinking learning. Students, as well as teachers, become stressed and overly concerned about the results of testing. Teachers then divert precious time to test preparation rather than, for example, developing historical critical thinking skills. Problem-posing education is the opposite of banking education, where education is almost freed from oppression through the critical engagement of students. And this is where we're going to use Kialo and Quiz to encourage critical thinking and move away from test and datification focused education. Although I'm not suggesting standardized testing must be removed from schooling completely, as it is becoming more and more of a reality for teachers, just suggesting that there are alternative means for teachers to access and critically engage their students, such as Quiz and Kialo. Quiz gives an instant feedback to students on their answers and hides learning in engaging quizzes, which is usually termed the chocolate-covered broccoli theory. Kialo is an ideal platform for respectful debates, making arguments with reason, evidence, and group analysis. Students use their critical thinking skills to evaluate information and use their social and emotional skills to understand and comprehend different points of view on their own. As the tool is designed for student discussions, it asks the question of what measures does Kialo take to keep the students safe. Students' input into Kialo is not pre-scanned before it is published to the rest of the students. Therefore, teachers need to be diligent in their monitoring of discussions taking place. Thank you, and now over to Ashleigh to conclude.
In summary, we've discussed 2 ICT tools which can be used critically and meaningfully to design engaging student activities. Kialo provides a means for discursive and collaborative learning, which tests students' ability to interpret key concepts, construct arguments, and respond in creative and analytical ways to stimulus. Quizziz provides instant feedback and aids teachers to design responsive tasks based around a range of learning strategies, such as question-based learning. We've discussed a range of practice-based and pedagogical issues associated with each ICT tool and how to use teaching skills such as teacher judgment, critical reflection, and differentiation. Please visit the link here to view our annotated bibliography which expands on these ideas, and leave a comment below for our team.